There is a particular kind of silence that follows a gunshot. It is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something heavier, a weight that settles into the air like dust after an explosion, thick and unshakable. In that silence, time does not stop. It fractures, it splits into before and after, and the world on either side of that divide is never the same. Los Angeles in December of 1964 was a city caught between eras. The palm trees swayed under a sky that never quite darkened, their fronds rustling with the whispers of old Hollywood and new ambition. The Sunset Strip glowed with neon promises, and the radio waves carried voices that spoke of change, some singing it, some demanding it, some fearing it. It was a city where dreams were manufactured and sold, where fame was currency and identity was performance. It was a city where a man could be everyone and no one all at once. Sam Cooke knew this better than most. He had walked its streets as both king and shadow, his name on marquees and his face on album covers, his voice spilling from car radios and jukebox speakers in every corner of the country. He had built an empire from melodies and heartbreak, from gospel roots and crossover ambition, from the belief that a black man with a golden voice could reshape the world simply by refusing to be silent. And he had succeeded. The world knew his name. The world loved his songs. The world believed they knew him. But the world was wrong. The man who sat in the back seat of a black Cadillac on that cold December night was not the Sam Cooke of magazine covers and sold-out shows. He was not the charming crooner who smiled for photographers or the business mogul who signed contracts with a flourish. He was something else, something quieter, something heavier, something that had been growing in the spaces between the spotlights for longer than he cared to admit. He was a man who had looked into the mirror that morning and seen a stranger staring back. The driver did not speak. The hum of the engine filled the silence, a low mechanical heartbeat that matched the rhythm of Sam's own pulse. Outside the window, the city blurred past in streaks of light and shadow. Storefronts and street corners, liquor stores and late-night diners, all of it familiar and all of it alien. He had driven these streets 1,000 times, but tonight they felt like a labyrinth with no exit, every turn leading him deeper into something he could not name. His hand rested on the seat beside him, fingers drumming an unconscious rhythm against the leather. A melody, half-formed and insistent, played in the back of his mind. It had been there for weeks, maybe longer, a refrain that surfaced in the quiet moments when the noise of the world receded. It was not a song he had written. It was not a song anyone had written. It was something older, something primal, a sound that felt like memory and prophecy all at once. The Cadillac turned down a side street, away from the glow of the main avenues and into the darker arteries of the city. Here the buildings huddled closer together, their facades cracked and worn, their windows dark or glowing with the faint yellow light of cheap bulbs. This was not the Los Angeles of movie premieres and cocktail parties. This was the other Los Angeles, the one that existed in the margins, the one that most people drove past without seeing. Sam knew it well. He had grown up in places like this, in neighborhoods where survival was a daily negotiation and hope was a fragile thing. He had clawed his way out, had built a life that seemed impossible from where he started, and yet some part of him had never left. Some part of him still walked these streets, still felt the weight of invisibility and the hunger for something more. The car slowed and came to a stop in front of a low-slung building with a flickering neon sign. The letters were half burned out, spelling something that might have been a name or might have been a broken promise. The driver glanced back at him, eyes unreadable in the rearview mirror. Sam nodded. He opened the door and stepped out into the night. The air was cold, sharper than he expected, cutting through the thin fabric of his shirt. He had left his coat somewhere, in the studio maybe, or in the dressing room of the last venue he played. It did not matter. The cold felt appropriate, felt like something he deserved. He walked toward the building, his shoes clicking against the pavement, with a rhythm that felt too loud, too deliberate. The door was unlocked. It always was. Inside, the lobby was small and dim, lit by a single bulb hanging from a chain. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing layers of older patterns beneath, decades of decay compressed into a single visible history. The air smelled of cigarette smoke and something sour, something that spoke of too many people passing through and none of them staying long enough to care. There was no one at the front desk. There never was. Sam moved down the hallway, his footsteps echoing in the narrow space. The doors on either side were numbered, their paint chipped and faded. Behind some of them he could hear muffled sounds, a television playing, a cough, the low murmur of voices. Lives being lived in small rooms, in temporary spaces, in the gaps between one place and the next. He stopped in front of a door near the end of the hall. The number was barely visible, worn down to a ghost of itself. He reached for the handle, his hand trembling slightly, and then he paused. There had been a choice once, a moment when he could have turned around, could have walked back to the car, could have driven home to the house with the swimming pool and the piano in the living room and the photographs on the walls that told the story of a man who had made it. But that moment was gone now, lost somewhere in the hours or days or years behind him. He was here because he had always been heading here, because every decision he had made had been a step toward this door, this hallway, this cold December night. He turned the handle and stepped inside. The room was exactly as he remembered it. Small, barely larger than a closet, with a bed pushed against one wall and a chair in the corner. A single window looked out onto the street, the glass fogged with grime, the view obscured. The light from the hallway spilled in behind him, casting long shadows across the floor. And there, standing near the window, was the woman. She did not turn when he entered. She stood with her back to him, her silhouette framed by the faint glow from outside, her shoulders tense. She wore a dark dress, simple and unremarkable, and her hair fell in loose waves down her back. For a moment Sam thought he recognized her, thought he knew the curve of her neck, the way she held herself, the particular stillness that seemed to radiate from her. But then the moment passed, and she was a stranger again. "You came," she said. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried in the small space. "I came," Sam replied. His own voice sounded strange to him, rougher than usual, as if he had been shouting or had not spoken in days. She turned then, slowly, and in the dim light he could see her face. She was younger than he expected, maybe 25, maybe 30. Her features were delicate, her eyes large and dark, her expression unreadable. She looked at him the way people looked at something they had lost and then found again, with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "I didn't think you would," she said. Sam did not respond. He stepped further into the room and closed the door behind him. The click of the latch was loud, final. "You've been running," she said. It was not a question. "I've been moving," Sam said. "That's not the same thing." "Isn't it?" He looked away, toward the bed, toward the chair, toward anything but her eyes. She was right, of course. He had been running, not from anything specific, not from danger or debt or scandal, but from something far less tangible. He had been running from the feeling that had grown inside him over the past year, the feeling that the man he had worked so hard to become was not real, that he was a character in a story someone else had written, and that at any moment the audience would realize the performance was hollow. "I heard the new song," the woman said, "the one on the radio, about change coming." Sam's jaw tightened. He had written that song in a fit of exhaustion and anger, had poured into it every frustration he felt about the world, about the slow crawl of progress, about the violence and injustice that seemed to define the times. It was a song about hope, but it was also a song about pain, about the cost of waiting, about the knowledge that change might come too late for the people who needed it most. "Everyone's heard it," Sam said. "Do you believe it?" she asked. "The change?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and he saw something in her expression that made his chest tighten. She was not asking about the world. She was asking about him. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I don't know what I believe anymore." She nodded, as if she had expected that answer. She crossed the room and sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. She looked small there, fragile, and Sam felt a sudden urge to leave, to walk out the door and back into the night and pretend this conversation had never happened. But he stayed. "Why did you ask me to come here?" he said. She did not answer right away. She stared at her hands, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on her dress. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet he almost did not hear her. "Because I wanted to see if you were still real." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and strange. Sam felt something shift inside him, a crack in the armor he had been wearing for so long. "What does that mean?" he asked. She looked up at him, and for the first time he saw tears in her eyes, though her expression did not change. "You've become a symbol," she said, "a voice for people who don't have one, a name that stands for something bigger than any one person. And that's beautiful, that's important. But symbols aren't human. They don't bleed. They don't doubt. They don't break." She paused, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I wanted to know if there was still a person under all of that," she said, "or if you had disappeared completely." Sam felt the ground beneath him shift. He had spent years building the image, crafting the persona, becoming the man the world needed him to be. He had learned to smile at the right moments, to say the right things, to perform not just on stage, but in every interview, every photograph, every interaction. He had become so good at it that he had forgotten there was a difference between the performance and the truth. And now, standing in this small room with this woman he barely knew, he realized he did not know how to answer her question. "I'm still here," he said, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. She shook her head. "No, you're not. Not really. You're somewhere else. You've been somewhere else for a long time." Sam wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but he could not find the words, because she was right. He had been somewhere else, somewhere distant and unreachable, somewhere that felt safe because it was empty. "I don't know how to be both," he said finally. "I don't know how to be the man they need and the man I am." "Maybe you can't," she said. "Maybe that's the tragedy of it." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was something else, something that felt like understanding, like the acknowledgement of a truth too painful to speak aloud. They sat there, the two of them, in the dim light of the motel room, and for a moment Sam felt a strange kind of peace. Not happiness, not relief, but the peace that comes from laying down a burden you have been carrying for too long. And then the door burst open. Sam turned, his heart lurching in his chest. A man stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, his face obscured by shadow. He held something in his hand, something dark and metallic that caught the light from the hallway. "Get out," the man said. His voice was low, edged with something dangerous. Sam raised his hands, palms out, a gesture of surrender. "I'm leaving. I'm going." "No," the woman said, standing abruptly. "Wait." But the man was already moving, crossing the room in 3 quick strides. Sam backed toward the window, his mind racing, his body tensed for whatever came next. The woman stepped between them, her hands raised, her voice pleading. "Please," she said. "He didn't do anything." The man shoved her aside, not roughly but with enough force to send her stumbling. Sam lunged forward, instinct overriding thought, and his hand closed around the man's wrist. They struggled, a chaotic tangle of limbs and curses, the room too small for the violence that erupted within it. And then there was the sound, not a gunshot, not yet, but the metallic click of a safety being released, the mechanical prelude to finality. Sam froze. The man froze. The woman froze. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. "Let go," the man said. Sam did not let go. His grip tightened, his knuckles white, his entire body thrumming with adrenaline. He looked into the man's eyes and saw nothing, no rage, no fear, just an emptiness that mirrored his own. "Let go," the man said again. And Sam, for reasons he would never be able to explain, did. The man stepped back, the weapon still in his hand, his expression unreadable. He looked at Sam for a long moment, and then he looked at the woman, and then he turned and walked out of the room, leaving the door open behind him. Sam stood there, his chest heaving, his hands shaking. The woman sank back onto the bed, her face buried in her hands. Neither of them spoke. There were no words for what had just happened, no way to name the thing that had passed through the room like a ghost. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Sam moved toward the door. He paused in the threshold, looking back at the woman one last time. "I'm sorry," he said. She did not look up. "So am I." He stepped out into the hallway and closed the door behind him. The sound of it shutting echoed in the silence, a small and final punctuation mark. He walked back down the hall, past the numbered doors and the peeling wallpaper, past the empty lobby and out into the cold night air. The Cadillac was gone. The street was empty. Sam stood there for a moment, looking up at the sky, at the stars that were barely visible through the haze of city lights. He thought about the song he had written, about change coming, about the long and painful wait for a better world. He thought about the woman in the room and the man with the empty eyes. He thought about the person he had been and the person he had become and the person he might never be. And then he started walking. He walked for hours, or maybe it was minutes, time losing all meaning in the rhythm of his footsteps. The city moved around him, indifferent to his presence, and he felt himself dissolving into it, becoming just another shadow among many. He passed bars and diners, gas stations and apartment buildings, all of them closed or closing, all of them holding their own small dramas behind locked doors and curtained windows. Eventually, he found himself standing in front of another motel. This one was different, bigger, brighter, with a neon sign that actually worked and a parking lot full of cars. It was the kind of place where people stayed when they wanted to be seen, when they wanted the world to know they had arrived. Sam walked into the lobby. A woman sat behind the desk, middle-aged and tired-looking, her eyes barely lifting from the magazine in front of her. "I need a room," Sam said. She glanced up, her expression flickering with recognition. "You're just a room," Sam said. "Please." She hesitated, then nodded. She handed him a key, and he took it without looking at the number. He climbed the stairs to the second floor, his legs heavy, his mind blank. He found the door and unlocked it and stepped inside. The room was ordinary. A bed, a chair, a television on a stand. The walls were a pale yellow, the carpet a faded brown. It smelled of cleaning products and old cigarettes. It was anonymous and temporary and utterly unremarkable. Sam sat down on the edge of the bed. He looked around the room, at the bland walls and the dark window, and he felt something inside him give way. Not a collapse, not a breakdown, but a quiet unraveling, the slow release of tension he had been holding for so long. He lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. The melody from earlier returned, the one that had been following him all night, and he let it play in his mind, let it fill the silence. It was not a happy song. It was not a sad song. It was something in between, something that felt like truth. He did not know how long he lay there, hours maybe, long enough for the sky outside the window to begin shifting from black to deep blue, the first hint of dawn creeping in at the edges. He thought about calling someone, a friend, a manager, anyone who might anchor him back to the world he had left behind. But he did not move. And then there was a knock at the door. Sam sat up, his heart pounding. He did not know what time it was, did not know who would be knocking. He stood and crossed the room, his hand trembling as he reached for the handle. He opened the door. The man from the other motel stood there, his face pale in the dim hallway light. He did not have the weapon anymore, or if he did, it was hidden. His hands hung at his sides, empty and limp. He looked at Sam with an expression that might have been regret or might have been something else entirely. "I didn't mean—" the man started, but his voice broke and he stopped. Sam stared at him, unable to speak. The weight of the night pressed down on both of them, a shared burden neither could articulate. "I just wanted you to know," the man said quietly. "It wasn't about you. None of it was about you." Sam nodded slowly. He understood, even if he did not understand. He understood that pain was a language all its own, that desperation made people into strangers, that the world was full of collisions that had nothing to do with intention and everything to do with timing. "I know," Sam said. The man nodded. He turned and walked back down the hallway, his footsteps fading into silence. Sam stood in the doorway, watching him go, and then he closed the door and locked it. He returned to the bed and lay down again. The melody in his mind was louder now, insistent, demanding to be heard. He closed his eyes and let it wash over him, let it carry him somewhere beyond the room, beyond the night, beyond the weight of everything he had become. And in that moment, just before sleep claimed him, Sam Cooke made a decision, not a grand decision, not a life-changing revelation, but a small and quiet choice. He decided that when the sun rose, he would write the melody down. He would give it words, give it life, give it to the world. And maybe, just maybe, it would mean something, or maybe it would not. But he would do it anyway, because that was all he knew how to do. That was all any of them knew how to do: keep singing, keep moving, keep believing that the notes meant something, even when the world seemed determined to prove otherwise. The sky outside continued its slow shift toward morning, the darkness retreating inch by inch, and Sam Cooke lay in a motel room in Los Angeles, suspended between one version of himself and another, between the legend and the man, between the song and the silence. And somewhere, in the space between heartbeats, change was coming. It always was.